Welcome. Today we're going to be discussing the technique Twin Kimono and how to relate it to other techniques in the American Kenpo system. So keep in mind, this is not a comprehensive list, far from it, and it is really not family groupings. What it is just different aspects of the technique that we're going to be using to draw threads between it and other techniques in the American Kenpo system. So let's start out with one of those ideas. So let's start out with lines. So if you look at the end of the technique, what we're doing here is we're going on a line, and then we're reversing that line back up to hit them, okay? So before we get into relating it through different avenues, let's talk through what you can do to lines. So in this case, you can start a line and continue that line. You can then reverse that line, or you can deviate from that line. And you can deviate onto another line, or you can deviate onto a circle. So in this video, we're going to be concentrating on is that reversal piece, okay? So as we said, we did the Twin Kimono with the reversal piece. Let's do a variation on that. In this case, a single version of that, which would give us lone kimono. We're now doing that exact same thing, and we're hitting that person by reversing that line. So let's bring in two other characteristics of this reversal of the line. One is the direction. In this case, the direction is on a diagonal. And the other is position on our opponent, which is now we're on the outside of that left. So let's take it from the outside of the left and bring it to the outside of the right, but still stay on that diagonal. That would bring in something like an entwined masons. But we're now bringing it down on the outside of the right, but still staying on that diagonal, like I said. But keep in mind, let's now change it to a different direction. Okay, we went on that diagonal, but we still have two other potential directions to go. In this case, we have the horizontal version of it, and that would bring in something like a parting wings. But notice it also changes our position on the opponent to the in between the hands. Okay, then we can do something like the opposite of that, which would then bring us to a vertical version. So now we're going to add in yet another opposite too, because up to now we've been doing everything with the upper part of our body or our extremities, and we're going to move it to the lower part. And that brings in something like a blinding sacrifice. At the very end of the technique, where we get through all these pieces, now we're going to do it with our leg on a vertical, where we come up and down, which then brings us that last piece. Okay, so now that we've talked through that idea, let's talk through a different concept. Let's bring in the concept of compelled. Okay, so Twin Kimono is a compelled technique. What that means is that they're pushing us. That forces us to do something. Keep in mind, there's two reasons why we do something. We're forced to, or compelled to. In other words, we have to, or we decide to. We have different options. We choose to do something, and that's purposeful. Okay, so in this case, we're going to concentrate mainly on that compelled piece of it. So if you notice, the compelled piece of Twin Kimono is to push us back. We can also do the reverse of that and do something like a destructive twins, where they're now pulling us, and now we're compelled to go forward. Or if you look at it from a different perspective, you could say it's purposeful. You're purposely going in to try and hit them, okay? But compelled meaning you're being pulled into it, okay? So now, there are other ways in which we can be compelled to do something. So in this case, let's talk through a different methodology. In this case, a push, which would be an in-flight, which then makes contact and then becomes applied. So in this case, something from the front, where we're compelled to go to the floor, that would give us something like an encounter with danger. Or we could then do it from the reverse, or from behind us, where we're now doing a compelled to go forward and fall forward. In this case, we're rolling forward. That would give us something like a leap from danger. Okay, so we've done both a grab and a push, but those are all done at the very beginning of the technique. We could do it at a different part of the technique. So in this case, something like the obscure sword, where we're the ones that's starting to do the purposeful defiance in this case, where we're stepping away and then they pull us back towards them, so that we can then take advantage of that and strike them. So in other words, we're being compelled to do something, but then we're purposely taking advantage of that compelled motion to strike them. Okay, so now that we've gotten through all that compelled versus purposeful stuff, let's talk through a different concept, one last concept. In this case, let's talk through locking. You'll notice the beginning of this technique, we're locking up those two arms. Okay, that's the double version again. Let's take it back to like we did in the beginning. There's also that single version, lone kimono, right? But notice this is now on a vertical. We can then turn that to a horizontal, and that would bring in something like a snapping twig, but again, yet against that elbow. Okay, we can move this lock onto different parts of our body. So let's start out with the extremities. So in this case, let's start out with the thumbs. If we take it to cross of destruction and falling cross, the beginning is of both of those techniques step and apply this pressure downward against the joints of those thumbs. The only difference being is what happens after that, whether we go in one circle or the other circle, okay? Which gives us cross of destruction, which goes that way, and falling cross, which goes that way, okay? So now that we've done that, let's move on to a different point of the body. We've gone way out to the thumbs. Let's go into the hands. So in this case, the wrist specifically. So that brings in something like our gift techniques. In this case, something like a broken gift, where we're doing the lock this way, okay? Or a gift to destiny, where we're now doing the lock this way, okay? So now that we've done a lot of the stuff up in the upper extremities, let's talk through a couple on the lower extremities. In this case, let's go against that knee. Something like the locking horns, where we're taking this left hand and applying that lock against the knee, okay? Or at the end of something like a dance of death, where we're now going against the knee using both our hand left here and our lower part of our body in order to lock up that knee, okay? So now that we've done the extremities, there are other different parts of the body we can lock up too. Let's consider one of those, which would be the neck. Okay, so in this case, something like a circling destruction, where we're actually doing the hit and then locking up. If you notice, it's my left hand to their left. Okay, we can then do the opposite of that, something like a glancing lance. After I take them down, we're now doing it with our right hand to the right. Okay, so one other thing my partner gets up is there's an opposite to that you can consider too. We're doing all the locking. They can then lock us up. There's a whole host of Kenpo techniques that get involved in them locking us up. We're really not going to discuss those in this video. So let's do a quick recap and how we related this technique. We did it through locking, then we did it through compelled versus purposeful, and then we did it with lines, in this case, reversing that line. We hope this video helps you understand the American Kenpo system just a little bit better. Thank you very much.